is here at the Los Angeles Times, a global media leader, that we sit down exclusively with Tre'vell Anderson, a journalist and pop culture curator. I'm Michael Reel, and this is ReelUrbanNews.com. With Tre'vell, we discuss the Oscar dust-up for 2016, the African-American impact in social media, and so much more. Tre'vell, you're a long way from South Carolina to the Los Angeles Times. Briefly discuss your journey.
Well, like you said, I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. I ended up doing my undergrad at Morehouse in Atlanta, did a degree in sociology, decided to do journalism as a career, went to grad school at Stanford, and somehow I ended up here at the LA Times. Mm-hmm. That's the fast track, you know.
And your grad work was in writing.
Yes, I did a journalism program. It was a one-year program at Stanford. It was only 13 of us in the program, and so it's like very intensive writing. A lot of it was focused on business writing and technology because it's obviously Stanford, but that didn't quite work for me. But it was definitely a great experience, and by being at Stanford, I learned about the fellowship program I'm currently in now at the LA Times.
What is life like for you as a writer here at the Times?
That's an interesting question. It's definitely, well, you always hear conversations about, young people in general and us being millennials and us not necessarily, knowing how to navigate traditional workspaces, right? But my experience has been very different. I think, at the LA Times, at least they've welcomed my youthful energy and my ideas in terms of how we can tell stories and how we can tell stories differently and engage new audiences that we may not necessarily always think about. So it's been a very kind of, I think, liberating experience in terms of coming into a space where they really kind of let you do you.
Mm-hmm. And you specialize in doing you.
Well, I am a firm believer in if you're going to do you, let it really be you. And, that's something that Morehouse taught me. Morehouse kind of really made me who I am in terms of, like, being secure in my sexuality and in my blackness and in everything that comes with that. And then when I went to Stanford, they really tested that experience and made me really decide if this is how I wanted to, comport myself and carry myself. And so by the time I got here, it was just, either accept me as I am or I'll go elsewhere. And they've been great at accepting me as I am and letting me, bring that into the work that I do as well.
You're African American.
That I am.
You're gay.
I am.
How challenging is that for you to maintain and still meet the standards of the Los Angeles Times and these global platforms?
Well, I think I'm very much into bringing my experience into my work, like I said. And my identity is very important to me. The black side, the gay side, the gender non-conforming side, the being from a single-parent household side, all of that is very important to me. And so all that I do is let that show up in the work that I try to do and the ideas that I put forward. And I realize that a lot of times that's not necessarily places where traditional media has focused in the past. Sure. But the people here at the LA Times have been very good at recognizing that I can potentially serve an audience that they don't necessarily do. And so it's been interesting, navigating this particular space and navigating media in general, being a person of color, being openly gay, and all those other stuff that I am. But it's something that I just have to do because I'm a firm believer in bringing my whole self into a space whenever I come in. And if that space does not allow me to bring my whole self, then I don't need to be there, is how I feel.
You do bring your whole self. You've written a plethora of articles. You are a Hollywood almost mainstay for the Los Angeles Times. You've been well received. We were talking with your colleague, Spencer, coming in, and we were just talking about, we wanted to talk about your history, but we can't not talk about the current Oscar dustup, which you have been really a voice of, a 24-hour voice, breaking news in terms of the Los Angeles Times and this Oscar dustup. What's your take?
Well, it's interesting. It's the second year that the top four categories of acting nominees are all white. And people are not happy about it. People weren't happy about it last year either. This year, however, we're seeing, more people, particularly on the celebrity side of things, vocalize their opinions. And as people begin to call for boycotts of the Oscars, people are calling for Chris Rock to step down as host. It's placed a lot of people in a peculiar position in terms of particularly black actors and black people in Hollywood. How do they, navigate their race in this particular conversation? Because the Oscars is hosted by a black man. One of the co-producers this year is a black man. But then a lot of people say, well, you will have Chris Rock doing this great, 5-minute monologue, but that's not enough. And the Oscars, the Academy needs to be better at diversifying its membership, changing its voting policies, but also, it's a conversation about broader diversity in Hollywood, and whether or not people of color, queer people, indigenous people, differently abled people, whatever the case may be, see themselves reflected in films, period, but then also those representations being awarded by the Academy, for example. So it's been a lot, and like I said, this year's response has been very different than last year.
Were you surprised at the response, not only from the public on the morning of the nominations, following the nominations, but also from the celebrity culture? Were you surprised by their disdain?
I think I wasn't surprised. I think, when you look at black celebrities, they have a tendency to be kind of measured in their responses. And so last year, you didn't see many people speaking out about potentially boycotting the Oscars. Second year around, a lot of them are like, okay, hold up. Particularly when we all feel as if there are a number of films that had black leads that should have gotten recognition, whether that be Straight Outta Compton, whether that be Creed, whether that be Beast of No Nation, or Concussion for Will Smith. And so people are saying the work was there, and y'all still didn't give these people the recognition that they're due. And so it's interesting, and a lot of the black celebrities have chosen to use the belief that we don't necessarily need the Oscars, need the Academy to give us this representation or this type of recognition, and we should start our own. And so that's kind of currently the conversation that's happening.
From your perspective, you're a Hollywood insider. How long will that wave, start our own wave, and the boycott wave? By the time the Oscars come around, will we still be hearing about a boycott, or is this just a 2-week temporary shutdown?
I think we will still be hearing conversations about diversity when the Oscars roll around. Will it still be on the whole boycott tip? I don't think so. I think that people will come to believe that we should at least support Chris Rock as host, Reginald Hudlin, who's the co-producer, a black co-producer this year. I think people will still want to support them, but we'll try to figure out other ways to address this conversation about diversity. And the Academy, for what it's worth, is in talks about addressing diversity. They have a black female president who's very vocal about the changes that need to happen. So we'll definitely hear conversation around diversity. Will it still be about boycott? I don't think so.
What kind of pressure is the current president of the Oscars, Cheryl Boone Isaacs, under?
Well,
How intense?
It's very intense. I mean, she's a black woman, in charge of this organization of over 6,000 people who are primarily white, primarily older, primarily male, primarily straight, primarily everything you would stereotypically think about somebody who has power. But her own experience in coming up through Hollywood has been one of giving voice to marginalized communities, to people of color. And so we know very much that when she says that she is disheartened by the lack of people of color in the nominations, it's genuine and it's real. And she's made efforts already to diversify the membership. Last year, she added over 300 new members, and a lot of them were people of color. They were women, some people of different sexual orientation. So she's done some things, but the thing about it is, when you want to diversify a body of 6,000 people, it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And so I do know that the Academy is in conversation about maybe ways that they change the voting process or ways that they, change membership titles. And so the pressure she's under is immense. But I think she's handling it the best she can at this point.
Looking at this whole Oscar, I keep calling it dustup. From your perspective, how important or how powerful has the social media imprint from the African American community been propelling this story, not only here in Los Angeles and across the country, but this is a global headline?
It definitely is a global headline, and a lot of it has to do with Black Twitter, it really does. April Rain, she's a Black woman, former lawyer. She's the one who started the hashtag Oscars So White last year. She's one of the reasons why we have this term that we call it, Oscars So White. Every day in the newsroom, that's the term we use when we're talking about, these diversity stories. And then, Black Twitter took that hashtag, ran with it, and other communities have taken that same hashtag because they also feel, not represented. But it's very similar to what we've seen with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? In terms of social media being kind of a galvanizing force for people who want to express their discontent, or people who want to, let their voices be heard in ways that they may not always have been heard. And so it's been very important, and I'd say probably one of the only reasons why we are really talking about it is because the people who don't see themselves represented in these bodies, in these films, are speaking out, and a lot of that's thanks to Twitter.
As a social and cultural curator, are Blacks in the media now enjoying the golden age of media?
I think we are definitely in a new age of media where Black people at least are getting a little bit more shine. I don't necessarily know if the shine we are getting is the best, or as inclusive as we would like, or as expansive as we would like. We are very much, still represented in ways that aren't necessarily the best, that don't capture the fullness of our humanity. But we do see those things changing. And like I said, once again, with Twitter has allowed a number of people to really create these media identities that they may not have been able to ever have. So April Rain is on CNN. She's on all these different outlets talking about Oscars So White. We have, DeRay and Netta from the Black Lives Matter movement who, are now kind of faces of this movement, are able to go to different events, different, media spots and speak on behalf of the community. And we didn't necessarily see Black people being involved in media and in that conversation in that way prior to social media, prior to Twitter. So we're definitely making some improvements, but we're definitely not where we need to be at all, by any means.
You are clearly in a privileged spot representing the Los Angeles Times. What's the responsibility as an African-American male writer sharing and telling these multiple stories?
We all often said at Morehouse, we have this idea that many people have, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And at Morehouse, Mother Morehouse holds a crown above our head so that her sons will grow into it, right? Being here at the LA Times, having this opportunity, I in particular feel as if, my responsibility is one to speak up. Being in this space when I hear stories that are a little off or are, trying to have racial conversation that is not right or is not appropriate or is not precise, I find it my responsibility to speak up and to say we shouldn't do that for XYZ reasons. I'm a firm believer that, just being in the room is not enough. If you're going to be in the room, you need to let them know that you're in the room, and you need to make sure that they're listening to you. And sometimes they don't listen to me, which is fine. But they're at least going to know my opinion on a particular thing. Because, traditional media in general has a tendency to cover things in particular ways that aren't necessarily the best. And so my personal responsibility, like I said, is to speak up, to give my opinion. In my particular writing, though I do a number of things in their entertainment sector, my hope is to uplift those stories of people of color, of LGBTQ people that we don't hear told, particularly from an entertainment perspective. We hear them from a health perspective. We hear them from a research perspective, maybe a local news perspective if somebody gets killed or whatever the case may be. But we don't hear them. We don't hear about, the openly gay black actors. We don't hear about, the underground, voguing ballroom scene here and those things. And so the stories that I pitch, I try to highlight some of that. Parts of the community that no one else is talking about, at least not at the LA Times. And I just feel that that's my job. That's the reason why I'm here, is to make sure that if and when I leave, that hopefully something has changed in the atmosphere and in the people around me, to where when they think of an idea that might have to deal with race, they hear Tre'vell's, nagging voice in the back of their mind, that makes them reconsider, or at least makes them, think a little bit more deeper about the topic, about the subject at hand.
Tre'vell, thank you for a wonderful opportunity. Thank you for your time, your talent, your continued perspective, and most of all, your insight.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it. All right.
I'm Tre'vell Anderson with the Los Angeles Times, and I'm with RealUrbanNews.com.